Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and today I'm coming with you to discuss the Day 18 news. Ukraine has lasted another 24 hours, and with it comes another 24 hours of glorious victories by the Ukrainians as they continue to hold the Russians mostly where they have been for the past 2 weeks. Now, before I move on to the news and our schedule for the night, I'd like to make note of something special we have in the chat tonight. You may notice that there is a bar in the live chat that says that I would like to donate to the American Red Cross. And I would love if everyone could put as much towards that as possible. I've kind of partnered with YouTube in a way to make this fundraiser, so all of the money that's going towards this goal will be sent to the American Red Cross as soon as the goal is reached. So the quicker we get to that goal, the quicker $5,000 goes to the American Red Cross, and I cannot say enough about them to say how much of a high standard I hold the American Red Cross to. They are a top-rate organization. They do nothing but the best humanitarian efforts around the world, and at the moment they are already in Ukraine helping out Ukrainians, and so any help that we can give will help them get a little bit further. Tonight after the stream, I'm going to donate $100 that I personally have. Although I don't have much right now. I'm going to make sure to help out Ukraine because that's what I'm doing. This is what this channel is about. And so that's what I'm going to do, pretty much. So if all of y'all would join me in helping them out, I would be more than appreciative because I have nothing but respect for the American Red Cross, the citizens, and the government of Ukraine. I support Zelensky, and if any type of aid, including humanitarian aid, can be done to help out the people of Ukraine, I'm all for it. So make sure to slam out that goal tonight because I would love to see all the donations as much as possible and see if we can all united get a little bit of extra effort and help to the Ukrainians. That being said, we're going to go over the schedule for tonight. We're first going to start off in the area of Kyiv. We'll then move to the Eastern Front, and in between we'll be answering questions and also recognizing the amount of donations we've gotten towards the goal. Then we will stop from the Eastern Front to the Western Front, then answer some more questions, and then we'll finally round out with the miscellaneous events that have happened around the country today and the international events as well, because we have a few of those. Then after that, we'll be taking nothing but questions from then till the end of the stream. Y'all may also notice that tonight I'm not complaining about being tired, and that's because I drank an espresso right before the stream, so I'm very happy about that, so I can actually focus on the news instead of trying to get my way through it. Now I can actually focus on it and talk about it a lot more, so hopefully there'll be less and that being said and all that stuff. And so that being said, let's get to the news today. I'm gonna have to start off with some unfortunate news for our American viewers actually, and that's that a New York Times journalist was killed today. 51-year-old Brent Renault was killed by Russian soldiers today in the area of Irpin. This is rather unfortunate. I don't believe this will lead to America having a stronger stance, at least policy-wise, against Russia in the war, because it's kind of accepted that people in a war zone may get killed, regardless of how unfortunate it really is. And nonetheless, it's just very unfortunate. Now, my comments on this, because some of y'all may have known that I've made comments every once in a while, kind of disparaging mainstream news for being too simplified and stuff like that. I just have to say that although I do say that, I don't wish bad doings on anyone who works in the mainstream news. They're people like everyone else, and a lot of them do have passion for their craft, and in that passion, they go and put themselves in dangerous situations every once in a while, like this one Brent Renault did, to try and get us the best news possible. And today he paid the ultimate price trying to tell the world what was going on in Ukraine. So I'd like to respect his passing. It was a rather unfortunate one, and I hope that his family does find solace in the fact that he was over there, as far as I know, trying to report the news of what was happening. Moving on from the unfortunate loss of a journalist today, we're going to move to the area of Hostomel, where we've seen very good news, and that's the Ukrainians have wiped out a pontoon bridge. Now, pontoon bridges, you can see this picture here, and I'm going to just kind of elaborate why this is important. People think that bridges and infrastructure are usually second to what the military's actual might is in terms of cannons and artillery and such things like that. But the thing is that the infrastructure that the military builds and the logistics that use that infrastructure is more important than any of the fighting capabilities that they possess. And so wiping out a bridge in construction is a huge deal, because this is going to make it much harder for logistical units to operate. It's going to make it much harder for them to launch offensives, because now they'll have to try and find another way to fjord this little river. These are actually, I believe, called rivers in Europe. They're called creeks in America, but nonetheless, they cannot cross this river anymore. So that's very good news for the Ukrainians. They've helped themselves out a decent bit by wiping out this bridge, and so it's incredible news. And also tonight, I'm going to do something a little special, because I haven't done this in a while. And these front lines and green areas have not changed ever since day one, because they still haven't really achieved their day one objectives, according to me. And so tonight, based off of what we've been seeing for the past week or so, I believe that we can make some general assumptions as to what the Russians' overall battle plans may be in the future. So that being said, I'll cover that later on tonight. That may be at the end of the stream, so that way everyone else who's needing to get the news can get the news and get on out of here. But nonetheless, we're going to move on to the Chechen Special Forces that were ambushed. We can see here that they were ambushed and fled from their vehicles. These pictures here that are left over is of one of their trucks. We can see that they captured a pretty modded out AK-12. It looks like it got the Cerakote treatment as well, so I bet whoever lost that was kind of a little pissed off to lose it. And then we can see some kind of grenade launcher. It kind of looks like a riot gun. So maybe it is, a riot gun is kind of like a grenade launcher as well. They fire smoke grenades and flash grenades and stuff like that. Not really sure which kind this is, though. And, I'll probably get an answer to that soon, because I have a wonderful group of mods, and they actually helped me out. And I was talking with them before the stream. They're incredibly knowledgeable, and I want everyone to thank the mods in my chat, because they helped me out a great bit with running this whole entire thing. And I cannot say enough how happy I am to all of my mods and to Drew for helping me out with the questions every night, because without them, it wouldn't be possible to deliver the kind of quality content that we have. So I'd like to thank them very much for what they do. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news in the Irpin area. I'm sorry, correction. We're going to move on down past the Irpin area, and we're going to see the Ukrainian MLRSs in action once more. We've been seeing this over the past few days, and so I'm just going to let y'all see the video. It's always cool to see Ukrainian MLRSs in action. We know they're probably hitting Russian targets by the dozens, because it appears that the Russians aren't learning anything about strategy whatsoever. They're keeping their units grouped up every time we see them on film. That may be different off of film, but, the films are catching them in their natural habitat and how they're naturally operating. And so I'd assume it wasn't much more different off of film. Moving on from that, there was a little bit of interesting interactions that happened today in the northwestern area of Kyiv, and we can see that there have been some Chechens that have joined the Ukrainian side. Looks like some Chechens actually know what's right. So that being said, we're going to wait for this to load. It may not load, and if it doesn't load quick enough, we'll just abandon this and move on. Maybe one more try. There we go. And I'll just let y'all watch the video. It's just a group of Chechens helping out the Ukrainians on their side.
مرتجخ أوكرانيا يحكي الخز الله قربانس ترجع تشريه تردو ليوش دخوي دوغا إن لو يويجا غرانتا ميوتشيو إكس دوغا وشي تاغن ليه موست كيت تاغن زاني سواوي إن شاء الله يخو الله قربان تسأل وشوك سبوتنا تأحمل خيتن حياكين يو شويت أي مستج الله قربان فاوت دخوي разведка дороги, разведка на подол, иншалла, около, там или там,
So let's discuss what he was saying a little bit in the translations, because a lot of people may not understand the dynamics that have occurred in Chechnya over the past few decades, for some Chechens to be aligned with the Russians and then some others to be strongly against Russia in any sort of stance. So when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Republic of Chechnya, right down here, it's kind of like this grayed outline area, and they've got a city in the middle called Grozny, and that's kind of like their major city. This area broke away from the Russians pretty much in its own way and tried to set up its own kind of like Muslim-based republic. Because you see, here's the thing. Here's why they broke away. They're largely a Muslim population, and that's kind of a rare thing to find inside of Russia, unless you're going further out into kind of like Eastern Russia, around Kazakhstan and all that. You start to see more significant Muslim populations around Kazakhstan. But due to how Russia kind of came to be, Grozny, which is mostly Muslim, just wound up inside of Russian territory. And so when they created this little breakaway republic, Boris Yeltsin, who was the president before Putin, said, we're going to go in there and we're going to take this thing back. And so what they did is that they did a lot of the things that you see in Ukraine today. They started to mercilessly barrage Chechen cities like Grozny. It was mostly Grozny. And one other thing that they did was just very sickening, is that they would just kill civilians without regard. I mean, like, even now in the Ukrainian war, while it looks like they're not operating with regard to civilian lives, for the Russians, they are. If you had seen what had happened in Grozny way back in the day during the Chechen wars, it was awful. Another thing that we saw back then when they were invading Chechnya is that the Russians would get their tanks wiped out like crazy. They had like no organization. They just drive the tanks into the city without support from the infantry, and they would just get wiped out. And it was just as simple as that. So afterwards, Putin became the president, and the second Chechen war began, and he did a more methodical approach, because they lost the first Chechen war, actually, which tells you that a smaller country can defeat the Russians, because if you look at Grozny, even thinking about the population-wise aspects about Russia and so on, they defeated the Russians the first time. And so during the second Chechen war, when Putin was in charge, they took a much more methodical approach, and they slowly but surely moved their way from the north of the country all the way to the south to the foothills of the Caucasus. And so they finally wiped them out after the course of 9 years. And during these two wars, the Russians treated the Chechens terribly. And so the Chechens that joined, cutting that story a little bit short, the Chechens that have joined the Russian side are called the Kirovites, I believe, is the correct pronunciation. And you can kind of call them the bootlickers in a way, because considering how poorly their people were treated under the Russians, during both of the wars and kind of a little bit afterwards, it would be kind of a bootlicking thing to go suck up to the government that's oppressing your people and then join their war. And so that's why you see this group of Chechens that are on the Ukrainian side that are kind of strongly and vehemently fighting against the Russians, because they kind of remember the stories of what happened to their people, or they actually care, one or the other. And so they're going to fight against the Russians as much as possible. And so that's kind of a breakdown of why you're starting to see Chechens on both sides of the conflict, because of how people started to react to the political situation within Chechnya once Russia invaded and started committing atrocities on the Chechens. Moving on from that, the last bit of news we have in Kyiv today is the shelling of Kyiv. And I'm going to show y'all that right now. It's rather self-explanatory. It's the shelling like usual, but I'll just let y'all see the video.
Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни.
You can kind of see it out there in the distance, just a little. Not really much to talk about in that video. It's just a warning siren with some sort of announcement, and then rockets firing off in the distance, most likely from an MLRS for sure. Moving on from the area of Kyiv, we've actually had no news in the Chernihiv area. Unfortunately, it appears that the Chernihiv area has started to become somewhat quiet over the past few days. That could be due to a lull in combat, maybe difficulty of uploading information to the internet about what's going on there. So we don't really know what's happening in Chernihiv as of the moment. So, that being said, I know you all love that. Make sure to take a little sip of a drink if you have one right now. We're going to move to the questions before we move to the Eastern Front. And so, what do we got, Drew?
So I am kind of just blown away right now. The Red Cross donation is already up to over $3,400 at the moment. Initially, I started copying and pasting all the different names of the donators, but we'd be here for an hour just trying to get through all the different names. I'll touch on a few of them. We've got an anonymous donor chipped in $500, which is impressive
Oh
to
my
be sure.
God.
We've got Don Watson chipping in $100. We've got several anonymouses chipping in $100 each. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's incredible.
Well, I gotta say this. I gotta take an aside for a minute for that because this is huge. Once again, I didn't really expect y'all to like hammer out this thing as much as y'all are right now. I'm kind of blown away because I expected it would probably take an entire week, and that's why this fundraising campaign is lasting for a week to raise this kind of money. And so we've already passed the halfway mark, and we're only about 20 minutes into the stream. So if this keeps up, we're probably going to reach over 5,000 in like the next 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. So I don't really know what to do about that, considering that this is going so well, y'all. I'm going to give Drew a second to take a look at the chat and see what the response is to this. I'm going to put up the stream starting soon card if y'all are down for this, and I'm going to up the goal another $5,000 and see if we can get $10,000 to the Red Cross tonight. So I'm going to give it just a minute. We're going to sit here for a second and answer a few questions, and if we get overwhelming support for that idea in the chat, I'm going to put up the card, go into my YouTube, and up the donation goal by a large deal, so that way we can try and get as much help as possible to the Red Cross. And so with that, we're going to start answering questions in the meantime.
Okay, so first question comes in from Nathan Purvis, and go ahead and provide feedback on how my mic is. Sometimes we have a little difficulty getting the volume exactly right, you guys. Nathan Purvis, do you think Russia is deliberately targeting Western reporters?
I do not think so, because this is actually the first reporter that has been killed, as far as we know, at least as far as the news has gotten to me. So I don't think they're directly targeting him. I believe that he may have been the victim of an artillery barrage. I'm not really sure as to the story of how he died. We just know that he died, and then his partner, I guess his cameraman, was with him, and he got severely wounded. And so I saw videos earlier today of him being taken into a hospital, probably within Kyiv, since that's the closest major city that probably has an operational hospital still. But I believe his name was Brent Renault. Yeah, he was killed on the spot. So I don't really know if they were targeting him directly. You know, we don't really have enough evidence right now to say either way whether they were or were not. I don't really believe that to be true, because in the first opening days of the war, CNN was actually kind of implanted within a Russian unit, watching them fight for the Hostomel airport. So I wouldn't really say that. I believe that this was more of like an unfortunate situation for the reporter, but we don't really have any information to go either way, if you see what I'm saying. So I'm going to kind of reserve those kinds of statements and making a definitive assertion until we can get more information. So I hope that answers the question as best as possible. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
So, two things: overwhelming commentary from the chat saying that the reporter was indeed killed via a bullet, that he was shot. And additionally, there appears to be a significant amount of support for upping the donation goal, because you're at 4,600.
Gee, okay, yeah, we're going to probably bump that up here. So since he was shot, I'm going to go back to that. I don't know, like, once again, you know, I'm going to err on the side of caution here, because we've seen a lot of Western journalists interacting with Russian units over the past few weeks. And while I do believe that the Russians act like barbarian animals in most ways to civilians and most people, they don't appear to be doing that to journalists, because they, you know, of course, are still trying to paint some kind of positive light about them and try and get some favor a little bit in the news in the West. So I'm not really sure about that, but this may be a change in stance against journalists if it was to go in a different direction. And so that being said, everyone, I'd just like for everyone to hang tight for a second. I'm going to pop up a stream starting soon screen. So if anyone joins, make sure to let them know, you know, in the chat that we're just upping the fundraising goal. And so that being
And
said,
to verify, the 5,000 goal has already been achieved.
all right. So considering that the speed that this is going at, I think I've got a general idea of how high this will go. So that being said, everyone, I'm going to be right back. It'll probably be a few minutes, so everyone just hang tight, and we're going to raise the fundraising goal and then go to more questions. So sit tight, everyone, and I'll be right back. All right, everyone, we're back. Let me make sure that we are back. Yes, we are. All right. So, I just had a quick little talk with Drew there while we were looking through this, and we have both decided that considering that we just hammered through 5,000, we're going to put this thing up to 25,000, and our goal is going to be $25,000 by the end of this stream alone. And if we can achieve that, we have done a huge service to Ukraine, the American Red Cross, and their efforts to help out the Ukrainian people. I cannot thank y'all enough. I did not actually think that we would hit this goal within the first 20 minutes or so, but I'm more than impressed with all of y'all. I got to thank y'all all so much. I wish I could go and pat y'all all on the back for that, because you know that means a lot to the Ukrainians to see that are in this stream watching this chat right now, to know that the entire world is supporting them to the point that we just blew through a $5,000 goal to fundraise for the American Red Cross. And so I thank you all so much. I'm sure we're about to reach 10,000 in the next 10 minutes or so, probably. So I thank you all very much. And with that, we're going to move on to the questions once more. And so what do we got, Drew?
So, next question comes in. Well, this is a sarcastic comment of sorts, but it's worth mentioning. Digi245 says, there was a time before Putin?
Yeah, there was a time before Putin, but Russia was a different beast under Yeltsin. Yeltsin was a famous drunk, and anyone who was alive at the time knows this. It was just true. I mean, like, they really had to kind of like carry him around with two people holding his arm so that way he could stand. You know, when they did a blood test, they actually found blood in his alcohol instead of alcohol in his blood. It was kind of known that he was like that, and he was a pretty incompetent Russian president. So there was a time, you know, I know it's a sarcastic comment. It's a pretty good comment, but there was a time before Putin. But honestly, it was a better time, because during that time we actually saw Russia agree to the 1994 nuclear treaty with Ukraine, where Ukraine would disarm and give back most of their inherited nuclear weapons from the Soviet Union to Russia. And so, in that regard, it was actually a better time, in my opinion. But, you know, once Putin got in charge, things started to change drastically. And so, that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so next question comes in from Lori Maislin. Says, if a stray missile or misguided missile lands in Poland, will that be enough to bring NATO in?
Well, the thing is that NATO probably isn't chomping at the bits, because we can see by the amount of troop buildups that we've at least had reported to us in Poland, which is only around like a few thousand American troops and a couple of thousand of other troops each from each member country. We know that the force isn't incredibly large, and so they would weigh this situation carefully, because there's a lot of things that could happen if a missile landed in Poland. One, it could kind of just veer over and hit a field, and then it's just blown up in a field, and that would probably get a response from NATO or really just the United States, because the United States is kind of the spokesperson of NATO. They would probably say something like, you know, you better watch it. That would be kind of like the key right there to, like, kind of like general mobilization of the military. We would start sending over a load of troops probably to get built up on the border at that point. We would probably start telling the Russians in much more of an affirmative way, you need to stop this war in Ukraine before we get involved. Even if it means nuclear war, that would probably be the stance that was taken at that point. But if a missile landed in Poland and it hit a house or something like that, and it killed several people, or maybe a dozen of them, then you would definitely see an escalation of conflict in between the West and the East almost immediately, right off the bat. The United States would probably start immediately condemning it. Poland would be demanding that Article 5 be invoked and they go to war immediately, you know, due to Polish citizens dying, and they would probably wouldn't stand for that kind of stuff, because no government ever stands for their civilians getting killed. Take a look at the Lusitania, 9/11, any other major event in history where a nation's civilians were killed and they were neutral in some kind of conflict, and that almost immediately led to them joining in. So that being said, if it would kind of depend on what the missile landed and, well, what the missile hit and where it landed is a better way of saying that. So I hope that answers the question. And then again, that's just kind of my hypothesis, my opinion on how how the Western governments would kind of view something like that. So it's not entirely true. It may be that even if a missile hit a field, they would be talking about invoking Article 5 immediately. But you do have to remember that both sides, while Putin runs his mouth a lot at NATO, you've got to remember that he's actually scared of NATO, because the United States compared to Russia, it's not any kind of bias we can see at this point. The US would practically wipe the floor against the Russians, because the Russians appear to be incompetent based off of their performance inside of Ukraine. And so that being said, you know, you've got to take all those things into consideration, but I hope I've answered the question. And by the way, Drew, I'm just wondering, how far have we made it on this fundraiser in between last time and now?
So sitting at $6,800, 10,000 viewers at the moment. If you guys can hit the like button, that would be extremely helpful in bringing attention to the fundraiser so that we can achieve that goal even quicker. Thank you guys so much.
I gotta thank y'all again, and I can't believe that there's that much support in terms of the fundraiser for Ukraine. It's unbelievable. I mean, like no one expected that. We actually all kind of thought this was a lofty goal of $5,000. But y'all have shown me that this isn't a lofty goal at all, and it had to be a lot higher. So we actually just bumped that up, and I thank y'all so much. And like Drew said, make sure, like everyone in this chat right now, everyone watching this stream, hit the like button because it helps us out in the algorithm, and it'll give us more impressions, which means this will be shown to more people. More people will hop on, and we can get even more money in this fundraiser even quicker. And if we hit the $25,000 goal within the next 30 minutes, I'll probably bump it up to 50,000 and see if we can get to that point as well. So that being said, everyone, let's try and get as much help to the Red Cross as possible. This would be insane if we could actually get that much help. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
You want to go ahead and move on to the news?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, we'll move on to the news, and then we'll answer some more questions once we pass the Eastern Front.
10-4.
So that being said, we're going to actually cut the question short, and we're going to move on to the rest of the news for today. So just for everyone who's new, because it appears that we have a much larger audience tonight, we're getting a lot of new viewers. This area here isn't actually the locations on the map of anything that happened. These are all location unknown events, so we don't really know where in the country they happened, and so we just block them all up into this little group over here. But the rest of the markers on the map are entirely accurate. Just want to let y'all know that they're not accurate down to the exact location, but they're accurate as in the geographical area that they're representing. You know, so if it's around Kyiv, the marker will be somewhere around Kyiv and so on. So that being said, we're going to move on to the location unknowns. So the first thing that we saw is that the Russians are looting a store. They literally backed up an APC and opened up the rear doors like it was some kind of moving truck, and they are loading it up with as much as possible. And I'm going to discuss what this shows, which we've seen before. But anyways, I'm just going to let y'all see the video. So as you can see right there, they're obviously taking all the groceries out of the store as much as possible. Like they are pretty much taking their arms and they're sweeping everything off the shelves. This is why. This almost has to be true at this point, because we're just seeing too much evidence to make this even a hypothesis or an assumption. The Russian logistics have fallen apart, and now they're going back to some kind of 19th century tactic of living off the land, quote unquote, because they just don't have the supply lines to make sure that they can feed all of their soldiers. And so now what they're doing is that the soldiers are taking it upon themselves to gut grocery stores of everything inside of them, including money, you know, because they're, you know, trying to make sure that they're got some currency that's worth something rarer than a ruble. And so we're seeing that happen, and that leads us back to what I said days ago, made an entire essay on pretty much about how the Russians just don't have enough trucks to supply their troops. And we keep on seeing enough evidence that that's true to say that at this point, it's pretty much definite that they don't have the logistical ability to feed and supply and run the vehicles and troops in their army. We know that for sure at this point. Moving on from that, we can see that there were remains of a BMP-3 that looks to have been blasted to pieces. I'm just going to show all this right here. Just so that way y'all know, that's actually the bottom of the hull. That's kind of like the chassis. of the BMP-3, just to let y'all know, because it's interesting that the rest of the BMP isn't there.
Виробництво Російської Федерації. Все в наявності можна зробити, скласти можна. Вон гусениці, двигун. Ще частина. І ось українська артилерія. Пряме попадання. Все буде Україна.
So what we can gather from this video, of course it's kind of obvious, and I don't want to state the obvious for too long, but it appears that this BMP was vaporized in a way, because it seems like there's pieces of it here, there, and everywhere, and I'm sure that one of these pieces have landed like 3 blocks away based off of how far the blast radius of this BMP and all of its parts being strewn about appears to be. I mean, like, axles are like 200 yards away from the tank in this video nearly, so that's kind of wild. Moving on from that, we got some more interesting information. The Russians tried and failed to fix the logistical situation. I'll show you that right here. Ah, no! They removed it. Alright, so here was what was happening. Here's what happened. I'm going to pull it up for y'all so that way y'all can see it. A normal logistical truck. I'm going to have to pull up both of these things to show y'all. Gaz. 4320. I think that's the 4320, yeah. Okay, so this is the normal Russian logistics truck. And you see, it's a decent truck. It can carry a decent bit. It can carry about 5.5 tons of cargo. That's its maximum load capacity. The thing is, though, is that it uses tires. And if y'all know anything about tires, tires get bogged down a lot more in the mud than tracks. So, that being, with that known, you know that this thing won't work well on dirt roads. It can only work on paved roads. Well, you know, it can of course work on dirt roads as long as it's not in Rasputitsa season. But right now, it's Rasputitsa season. The mud is terrible everywhere. And so these things loaded down to max capacity will probably get bogged down in the mud. So what the Russians did, which I couldn't show you in the video, is that they started to use DT-30s. Now these are very rare. You can see one here. These are an incredibly rare kind of transport vehicle in the Russian army. They only have a handful of these things, and they started to use them because of how bad the logistical situation is. They said, like, we can't even wait anymore. We have to pull these things out because we have to figure out some way to stopgap this terrible situation until we can find some way to fix it, either by having the pipeline brigades start laying out the pipelines, or having the railroad divisions start laying down railheads into Ukraine so that way we can start easing the supply situation. So they pulled this thing out, and it got destroyed immediately. It was burning in a field, just like trudging through the mud full of supplies, and they hit that thing and they destroyed it. I don't really know exactly how many they have, but I was told that these things were rare. So let's see if we can actually get a number of how many of these things there are. Unknown. They were produced from, well, wait a minute. Well, probably from 1982 till some other time. It doesn't really look like many of them were used. You see right here, it's already mentioning that one of them was destroyed during the invasion of Ukraine. I'm trying to figure out if we can actually get a number on this. How many DT-30? Let's just see if we can get an answer to that. I don't think we will. It's kind of unfortunate. I was told these are rare. And I believe it looks like they're probably a kind of a very specialized looking vehicle, and so I would assume that they are rare. But I can't find any information about it. If someone could get us an answer to that in the comments, if y'all can find an answer to it, because I don't want to hold y'all around too long for me trying to find an answer to that, please let me know, because I would actually like to know how many of those there are. They look like a very specialized vehicle, so I'm sure that there's actually a very limited number of them. So, moving on from that, we're going to move on to this next bit, which is a patrol of Ukrainian soldiers that went to some Russian vehicles in the distance to check out the damage to them. So nonetheless, I'm just going to show this to y'all. Now, we don't know exactly where this was, but I'm assuming it was probably in the Kharkiv area, because Kharkiv is currently covered in snow, We're still trying to work on how to get weather presented, and I haven't really had a lot of time to work around with that. But nonetheless, I'm just going to let y'all watch the video uninterrupted from here.
Славная 93-я дала пизды, блядь.
Выжившие, блядь. Достань гранату.
Сейчас, плюс.
И бизончик.
И бизончик, красавчик. И третья сила тоже тут с бизоном.
Скажу, тут я нажал.
Да?
Да, и тут танк за мене вхуяв. Потім металевий я розстріляв.
Горчит, по-моему, вот этот танк горчит.
That's ammo cooking off and exploding inside the remaining burning vehicle. Incredibly good news for the Ukrainians once more. They just keep on wiping out Russian vehicles. The Russians just can't give them enough to destroy. They just keep on taking them out time after time. And it's kind of leading me to assume that in this modern day and age, it appears that tanks are kind of becoming obsolete due to the effectiveness of AT weapons. Now, that's entirely an assumption, and I don't really have a lot of facts to back up. But due to the javelin and kind of like infantry carried weapons much like it, it appears that they are so effective and they have such a long range that tanks are kind of starting to go back through that phase that we saw during like the 50s and the 60s, where armor was completely pointless. And, you know, so that led to the creation of kind of like the no armor is best armor era of tanks like the Leopard 1 and so on. And I believe we're kind of going back to that if we're going to keep tanks on the battlefield. I feel like they'll still be heavily important, you know, due to the cannon that they have on the tanks. You know, it provides a decent amount of infantry support when used correctly, but I don't really think the armor is able to keep up to speed anymore with the destructive power of anti-tank weapons. So I believe that they're probably going to start going through a very rapid change in development and how tanks are designed in the future. They may start to lack armor once more like they did back about 50 or 60 years ago. Moving on from that, when you see an Ukrainian ATGM at work speaking about destroying Russian vehicles effectively with an ATGM, we can see the Ukrainians using one here to destroy Russian vehicles. So I'm going to let y'all watch that real quick.
Хуй я знаю.
Його їбашим нахуй.
Ебаш.
Трошки
Друг.
ближче.
От тихо.
Що, мотолига, блядь?
Мотолига? Да, сука, не наша цель.
Наша.
Тоже наша?
Ні, голови поміть. Блядь, херня.
Ай-яй-яй.
Ти, сука.
Oh, and they got it. Very good hit. Very good kill. Looks like they've got another Russian tank knocked out once more. And you can see what I'm talking about now. It appears that the ATGMs are just so effective at what they do, it's practically pointless to use tanks at this point, or really rely on the armor that they have. It seems like tanks are kind of going back into the direction, like I said earlier, of no armor is best armor, because it appears that armor is practically ineffective against the firepower that an ATGM simply wields on its own nowadays. So what you can take from that is I'm generally starting to get the picture from this war alone that it appears that tanks are kind of becoming obsolete due to the effectiveness of ATGMs and their range now. But that may be different, you know, it depends on the situation. Like for Western vehicles like the Abrams and the Leopard 2, although we've seen the Leopard 2s get wiped out pretty easily in Syria when the Turks used them against the Syrians, we can get the general idea that it might be different for Western vehicles, but from what we're seeing in Ukraine, the Russian vehicles just can't even deal with it anymore. So that being said, time for everyone to take a little sip if you're playing the drinking game. The Russian bridge laying convoy was wiped out. We've actually seen a couple of these today because it appears that the Russians are starting to try and build some kind of makeshift pontoon bridge sort of things throughout the country, and we can see here that one of these was destroyed entirely. So I'm going to show you all that. It's very good stuff. Those grapes? I don't think they're grapes. I don't really know what those things are. If someone in the comments could tell me what those things are supposed to be, I would love to know, because I don't know what they are.
А ось ці трофеїв, повна машина.
And there was the bridge laying tank.
Ось тут була закладка наша. Другий підрив. Слава Україні!
Добрий вечір, ми з України!
Very good stuff. It's always good to see another Russian convoy knocked out, and especially a bridge-laying convoy, because I assume that this is what this entire convoy and its purpose is for, is to lay a bridge, and the rest of these supply trucks are just there to support the bridge-laying efforts. So that being said, when you see a bridge convoy wiped out, now that's a big deal, because that's hindering a Russian offensive somewhere, because they can't move troops across that area of the river that they've kind of selected for that bridge-laying vehicle to go and lay the bridge across. So that is a huge deal, and I'm very glad that that's occurred. And another thing I'd like for y'all to see is this Ukrainian railway map. Now, a lot of y'all are probably like, now, Enforcer, what does this have to do with the war? Well, it has a lot to do with the war, because we can see where the front lines probably are, or where they're close to, or maybe the destruction of railheads that the Ukrainians have kind of like set up based off of this map. So I'm going to make sure to get it full screen, and we can see right here all the closed railway stations. So you can see all the ones in Kharkiv, except for these two right outside of it, on the ring road right near the Russian front actually, are closed. We can also see that these are closed, and now you're probably saying, oh, the Russians, you know, they must be here, but that's not entirely true, because both of these railroads either run into Donetsk and Luhansk, or they run into Kharkiv, and so I bet they just closed them because there's really nowhere for them to go once they get to Kharkiv, and that entire rail network in between here and there has kind of been cut off from everything, so it would just make sense to close those. Up here as well, we can see that the stations in Sumy, Konotov, and most of the stations moving towards Kyiv have been shut down, and it appears that that may be, except for this one here, actually. This one's kind of, it's got an X on it, a red X, but it doesn't have the red dot on it, so it's not entirely closed. It's open in some sort of fashion in some way. And so that tells us that the Russians have probably made breakthrough convoys pass through this area, and so rail services were shut down as kind of like a preemptive measure, and railheads were destroyed in that area just in case if bad went to worse. So based off of that, we can actually look at all of the stations of calling, well, most of the large stations of calling inside of Ukraine, because there's hundreds of them, and we can see that they're in generally good shape. Now, this is according to the 13th of March, because for my American audience, the Europeans do dates a different way. We put the month first and then the day. They put the day, the month, and the year. So the units of time get larger as you move from left to right, instead of having a medium-sized unit of time to the left, and then days in the middle, and then the year at the end. It kind of makes sense in a way to me, I assume. You know, it makes very much sense to people who grew up with it. And so that being said, if y'all like to take a look at this railway map, make sure to click on the link in the description below, because I've loaded this map in its entirety, and you can just go to this point on the map and click on it and take a look at this railway map for yourself. As railways are critically important to war efforts, they transport a bulk of materials, and it's also very interesting because we can get a general idea of where the front lines are. That being said, we're going to move on to the next bit of news we have. Everyone take a sip. We're going to move on to the next bit of cruise missiles flying over. We don't know where the location is, but nonetheless, we can see that 2 cruise missiles flew overhead of these people on the street. And so I'm going to show that to y'all real quick.
Ша йде! Ша! Воно, іде! А куди дзвонить?
And there's the second one.
300? Ой, 300. 2000 кілометрів дальність.
Ще одна йде. Оце дають, оце тобі і мітки оті. Вони десь ті мітки виставлені. І вони, дивися, йдуть пошти по одному курсу. Да.
Так дивися, бачиш, я тобі кажу, що з Азова, не з Чорного моря. Чорне море праві,
And then this is just a loop, so I'm going to cut that short. That being said, we can see that 2 cruise missiles flew overhead. Everyone take a sip, I said it again. But 2 cruise missiles flew overhead, and they went on to their targets. We don't know where the targets are, and we don't even know the location that was filmed at. But we do know that 2 cruise missiles apparently splashed down later on during the day somewhere in the country, and maybe we can have some sleuths try and figure out where that was exactly, because there was an area that was hit by cruise missiles, but I believe it was hit in the middle of the night, and it wasn't hit during the middle of the day. I may be wrong in that assumption, but nonetheless, we'll find out later. So here we can see that a fuel kitchen was captured by the Ukrainians, and we can see the terrible condition inside of this kitchen. It looks like it's never been cleaned, and if this was a food truck in the United States, the health inspector would have shut this thing down before it was even built. So that being said, let's watch it.
Всем привет. Кацапы оставили русский КамАЗ. Отгоревшие клеммы. На стартеру то же самое. Опа. Приїхали, пацани. Тянули танком. Оторвали бампер. Сейчас прийдуть пацани, возможно, заведем. Поїду до нормальних людей. Песни розбили окно, возможно. Ну а так нове. 19-го года выпуска. Польова кухня на колесах. Сейчас покажу, що всередині. Картошка, морква гнила, померзла. А так, огонь. В Україні нема такої машини, я лично не бачив. І котли, і що хочеш.
Okay, now I have to back this up because I actually worked at a restaurant before as a server before I did this, and this was months ago, and it was a great working experience. It was a very wonderful thing to do. I liked it a lot. But that being, but moving on from that, I'm not going to say that again. We're not doing that. Everyone, stop drinking for now. This stuff is just horrid looking. It looks like they've never cleaned it ever. Like the sides of the metal, it looks like it's covered in like some kind of grease. It just looks terrible. It's an awful condition. The restaurant I worked in, we've never had equipment that looked like it was just as unclean as this. And I know it's not like unclean as in it's got like burn stains on it and stuff, but it just looks like they've never actually taken like a wet rag with some soap on it and just scrubbed the stuff down eventually, and you can only assume what the inside of these stoves and drawers look like if the outside looks like this. It's terrible. So I'm just gonna let you watch the rest of the video.
Кухня на колесах. Жратву варили, завонялося уйобки.
And there, now we see what the inside looks like. Now that is horrid. And they're feeding soldiers that. The Russians are feeding their people that. And they're already starving. And then you feed them something that will give them food poisoning. And you can just assume how bad the Russians are off. And now you probably see why they're backing up APCs to grocery stores. And they're just emptying out the whole thing. Because they don't want to eat this slush.
Уйобки.
And like, what is this? I mean, like, all we see in this food truck is potatoes and onions. Like, is that all they're eating? Is that all the food, the field kitchens have supplies for? Is just onions and potatoes? We don't see any kind of refrigerated meat in here, although this probably doesn't have a refrigeration unit. We don't see anything.
Тарілочки, приправки. Все для наших пацанів. Вилки, ложки.
Yeah.
Огурці побилися. Рахіти. Духовка типа. Ну и остальное.
You can see the condition of this thing is awful. I don't even have to say anything about that. We're just going to move on. Y'all can just think about that for the rest of the night and just imagine the horror of a Russian getting food from a field kitchen. You know, they must be more nervous getting food from a field kitchen than they are getting disciplined by their commanding officers. So we can see that another bridge layer was captured today. This is another picture of a different bridge layer, I'm assuming. This may actually be the same one. I'm not really sure. I can't really tell. But nonetheless, it's another bridge layer, or it's the same one. Regardless, it's a bridge layer. That's all I can say about that. Other news that's location unknown is that we can see that a BMD was captured intact. So I'm just going to let y'all see that real quick.
Voilà les Russes, les fils de pute. Hein? Convoy ебан. Convoy. Русский иди нахуй, блядь. Сука.
Also, another thing that was really interesting to me, and I have to thank my mods again. I'm not gonna say names, but the mod team is incredible. They actually got me a little bit of information about the BMDs, and the BMDs have about 10 to 12 millimeters of armor across the entire tank, so it's lightly armored. That's so thinly armored that you could generally say that anything larger than 5.56, perhaps like a 308, could probably punch. Well, I wouldn't go that far. Actually, we're going to bump that number up. A 50 caliber round could definitely punch through it. Those 50 caliber rounds, I believe, at like the lower end, they have like 27 millimeters of penetration, even without like armor piercing rounds or anything like that. So that's really cool to know that you can pretty much wipe out a BMD or a BMP with a 50 caliber rifle. So if any of y'all know of anyone who would be willing to donate their 50 caliber rifles in the US to the Ukrainian cause, that'll definitely help them knock out a lot of the lighter equipment that the Russians are using. Moving on from that, we can see a very sad scene as a Ukrainian funeral procession was held today in an unknown city. But nonetheless, we can see that all the people gathered together to give this man a good passing, and the title stands that they were all united until the end. As Ukrainians, they lived as Ukrainians, and they'll die free people on Ukrainian soil before the Russians will ever get control of their lands. So I'm just going to let you watch the video. It's very moving and emotional. Nonetheless, here's the video. There's always a cost to the war, and unfortunately, good people always die in a war. Good soldiers, good, just normal citizens, and it's always unfortunate to see the end results of some of the fighting that happens of people who've been long since passed, probably by the time that funeral procession came around. And it always makes you think, really hard about the people who are fighting this war, because that man probably had a family and he will never see them again, and his children will probably grow up without really not knowing their father too well, rather than they'll know that he was a hero and he defended their country until his dying breath. And so, adding on to that, if y'all would like to call up your senators and not only donate to the Red Cross, but call up your senators and governors and maybe your representatives as well if you would like, and make sure to try and call them up and demand that they try and make more effective measures, maybe more militant measures against the Russians and their war in Ukraine, make sure to do so, because that could only help out and it couldn't hurt. At least it couldn't hurt until a war started. So maybe we could start doubling down on the pressure we put on Russia, maybe start getting a little bit more militant in our stance, and maybe perhaps the Russians would start to back off and maybe enter amicable discussions with the Ukrainians. As our last location unknown marker today, we can see, ending off on a high note, that there was a Bayraktar strike on a Russian command post. This is very good stuff right here, because this has knocked out a unit's command, you know, and that's pretty much self-explanatory. You knock out a commander and they lose communication and coordination for a short while until they figure out how to get around that. So I'm going to show y'all that I'm going to show that to y'all. Good stuff right there. It's always good to know that the Ukrainians are still fighting as hard as they were on the first day, and it appears that there will never be a sign of stopping on that. So the Russians will just have to get ready to sit there and take it, I suppose, as they try and push through the rest of the country. I'll also be clearing up something that the mainstream news said today. And I mean mainstream, not as in just like CNN or Fox. I'm talking about CNN and Fox and every other news network. They said something generally untrue, and I would like to make sure to clear it up before the end of the stream. So that'll be coming later on in the stream, so stay tuned if you would like to hear what they said that was wrong, and it was clearly wrong. So we're going to move on down to the area of Kharkiv. We've unfortunately gotten no news from Sumy since day 15, so I'm assuming that the fights around Sumy have kind of come to a lull. We haven't gotten any official news from either the Russians nor the Ukrainians that Sumy has been captured, so we know that Sumy is still holding. We just don't really know what's going on up there, or if the Russians are just trying to avoid fighting inside that city. So now we're going to move on down to Kharkiv, and we can see here that there was a Russian airstrike, and we can see the aftermath of it. I'm not sure what this facility's purpose is. I don't really want to sound somewhat uninformed here saying this, but it kind of looks like a livestock yard, kind of like it has chicken coops on it, but I'd like if someone could correct me on that. But these look a lot like the large chicken coops I've kind of seen here in the southern US. But once again, I could be entirely wrong. So if anyone knows something about this building and what its actual purpose is, I would love to know, because it appears that the Russians went out of their way to target it. Moving on from that, we've got some actual information inside the city of Kharkiv. We can see that tonight there's been some massive shelling inside of the city. I'll show you all that right now. And I would like to also make a special note that tonight's shelling sounds a lot more fierce than other nights. It sounds like they may be hitting them with larger caliber rockets. Or maybe they're not using rockets anymore and they resulted to SPGs that are firing actual high explosive shells into the city. I'm going to let y'all take a listen to this video and let y'all see what you think for yourselves.
Пиздец, блядь. Да, машину разъебала нахуй. И он дома.
ебануться. Пидорасы, ну нашли, блядь, эту позицию.
So as you could tell, the shelling sounded a lot more intense. You know, it's a really kind of silly thing to say. It sounds a lot more intense, but it does sound like they're using higher caliber explosives because the explosions just sound so much more powerful than the nights before. So I don't know if that's the Russians trying to double down and maybe kind of like double the explosive yield of the barrages. I'm not really sure. You don't have a lot of information to say that, but just off of the sound alone, it sounds like they're using a lot larger caliber MLRSs perhaps, or SPGs. So they may be using these Smerches now almost exclusively that we saw on day 15. On to the rest of the news in the city, we can see that a gas facility of some sort was hit, and it had like an explosive flame of fire shooting out of one of the pipes. I'll show you all that right now. I'm going to cut this short because it's pretty much just the fire blazing on for the next 30 more seconds or so. And I respect y'all's time, and I don't want you to watch that for a whole 30 seconds. But a gas pipeline somewhere has been hit inside the city, and it's on fire. Hopefully they get that situation under control, because it's hemorrhaging gas, and it's just being burned out right there, and so it's not being able to be used by the city. So hopefully that can be fixed soon. Hopefully that's not in a very dangerous area where they can't get to it, so that way the citizens of Kharkiv that are still left there aren't going to be suffering through any cold nights if they already are. So moving on from that, our last bit of news in Kharkiv, and then we're going to go and answer some questions, and I'm going to see what the fundraising goal has reached at this point, and I'm very excited to figure out how much we've actually raised for the Ukrainian cause and for the Red Cross to help them out. And so we can see that there's been more damage in Kharkiv. I'm going to show you all this right now, and just make no comment. It speaks for itself.
Ощущение, как будто я попал в какой-то фантастический фильм. Это центр Харькова.
It's a terrible thing to know that the entire city looks like this at this point, but it's an incredible thing, and it's a wonderful thing at the same time to know that it's looking like that because the Ukrainians have not lost the city. Either there was two things that could have happened here. Either the Ukrainians were going to hold this city and it would end up being partly destroyed, or they would have given up the city and it would be largely intact. And so in a way, it's unfortunate that the city is being destroyed, but in another way, it's an incredibly good thing because we know that the Ukrainians have not given up the city yet, and that there's no chance of the Russians taking it anytime soon from what we can tell, because they have not made it into the city past the first few days and then they got pushed back out. So, now we're about to move on to the southern front. But before we move on to the southern front, we're going to ask we're going to ask Drew the goal we've reached, and we're also going to answer some questions. And so, Drew, how far has the goal made it?
So incredibly, we've already doubled the original goal at $10,157 at the moment. Maybe I would suggest that we don't continue moving the goal line. I think 25,000 is a solid amount in terms of we can always go above and beyond that. People can always go above and beyond that, but it'd be nice for them to hit the goal. You know what I mean? Rather than continue bumping it down the road. I'd love to say some special thank yous to some of these high donors. We've got Terry Morganson donating $100. We've got Anonymous donating $100. You know who you are. Thank you. Andy Gelman donating $100. We've got another Anonymous donating $100. Thank you. You know who you are. We've got James Sinclair. I don't know if I already read that one. DJ Chong donating 50. Forgotten X Light donating 50. We got Dan Tran donating 50. Scott PGH donating 50. Another Anonymous. Just so many anonymouses. You guys all know who you are. Thank you so much for what you're helping to do here.
And you are all helping out the Ukrainian cause to a degree that you can't even, that none of us can even imagine. And I don't even know how much that's going to help them out. But every bit counts. And so, how many viewers do we have right now, Drew?
Currently sitting around 11,500.
All right, let me tell you something, all 11,500 of you. Every dollar you give to the Red Cross is another dollar of aid that will be going to Ukraine in some way, shape, or form, most likely. And so if you can donate any amount of money towards that cause, we started out with a $5,000 goal. We have busted through that in the first 20 minutes of the stream and have already gotten up to 10,000. And so if you, all of y'all donated $5 right now, we would be well beyond that goal. And so even just $5 would be a huge effort in helping out the Ukrainians at this point. So if you got $5 to spare, throw it down right now, and let's see if we can make it to that $25,000 goal. Because if we can, that's going to be something we can all remember as a community on this YouTube channel, is that we helped out the Ukrainians worth about $25,000. So just remember that, and just remember, $5 from each of you would get us so much farther to the end of that goal, but that would be a huge deal, and I would be eternally grateful to y'all, and I know that everyone in Ukraine would be more than grateful for all the support that we could give them. So make sure to smash out some more donations real quick. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the questions.
Okay, so next question or comment. We've got a lot of brain power out there in the chat. We've got folks chasing down answers to your questions. Sir Gods comments that all the northern countries have some form of snow track vehicles, but they are the rarest of hardware, basically emergency deployment only. And then Mitch V comments in, doing some research, coming up with a number of around 50 D30s.
Wow, those things really are rare. That's incredibly rare.
DT30.
Yeah. So going off of that to kind of like follow up on what they're saying here, that means that they are incredibly rare. And so losing one is a literal percentage of the actual total of these vehicles that they own. Losing one of them is 1 out of 50. I don't know the exact percentage on that. I know that y'all are smart enough that y'all are about to start pumping out the percentage of lost vehicles just off of that alone here in a second. But that's still a decent amount just to lose one if you only have 50 of them. So we're going to move on to the next questions here. And what do we got, Drew?
Next question comes in from a random person, asks, has anybody done the analysis of how much these losses have cost the Russians?
No one has, actually, and I've wanted to do that, but the math doing that takes time, and then we'd have to get exact vehicle numbers, and we'd have to have proof of all the vehicles lost. And I haven't been able to get anything down pat with that. You know, while we do have a general idea, it's still an approximation. And so we'll probably try working on that. We do know that the destroyed amount of vehicles, at least in APCs, is over 1,000 now. So we know that the Ukrainians have knocked out a decent amount of armored personnel carriers, probably a large deal in monetary costs there. But they've also, the Ukrainians have also captured like 5 pantsiers, and each one of those cost 15 million. And then we know that Igor up there in the location unknowns, he went on a walk one day and he came back driving into town with a Tor, which is worth about 20 million. So we know in AA vehicles alone, they're already over the 100 million mark in lost equipment. And, you know, that's not even including like the Tunguskas we saw getting burned near Mykolaiv, which were in a giant line, and there's like 8 of them. We don't know how much those cost. I mean, there's just loads and loads and loads of vehicles, and we haven't been able to tally all those up yet that we've seen on video and calculate the costs of them. So we don't actually have that figure right now, but that's a really good point. I think we're all probably going to try and collectively start butting heads and getting a figure on that. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
So we are past the halfway point on the fundraiser, over $13,200 raised of the goal.
Hey, everyone's starting to throw down $5. And if y'all can keep on throwing down $5, we're going to reach that $25,000 goal tonight. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Wolfgang. Any updates on Russia asking the Chinese for military help?
I saw that. It's not in the news tonight, but I did see that. And there has been no updates as of yet. I don't really know if the Chinese are going to try and help out the Russians. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking like this, and maybe y'all will see my line of reasoning here. The Chinese are probably not going to wind up helping them, and here's why. The Chinese have a large export economy, and so they produce a lot of goods inside of China solely for the purpose of exporting them. And now you're probably saying this, because you're probably already seeing where I'm going with this. Well, if the United States and the European Union shut them off from exports, like we kind of done with Russia with oil, that's not really going to mean a lot because, you know, I mean, like they have a whole bunch of trading partners, right? So it's not really going to mean a lot to their bottom line. But here's the thing. They make literally all of their money off of trade from the European Union and the United States alone. And I did the math on this the other day, and if both the United States and the European Union cut out most of, if not all of the trade coming from China and exports, they would be in a trade deficit every year in total with all the countries they trade it with of around $100 billion. So they have to view this carefully because they already see that the Western stance against Russian aggression has been incredibly strong, and anyone supporting them is getting a side eye from the West. And so China stepping in and actually helping out Russia with military aid would be seen as a very severe thing in the West, and considering that they're already kind of in an aggressive stance with the West on Taiwan, they're probably viewing this very carefully in terms of their economy, because if the United States and Europe were to do an unprecedented move and sanction them as heavily as they are the Russians for what they're doing, their economy would start to shrink really quickly, because they make $400 billion a year off of international trade. That's including the US and the EU. And if they lost that, they'd be in a deficit of around 100 million. 100 billion, sorry, correction there. So they got to view this very carefully. They may not want to actually start disrupting their kind of fragile economy because it relies on the exports a lot. So they're going to start looking at this in a very careful way. And so that being said, I hope that answers the question of probably what the Chinese stance is going to be on military aid. Then again, we don't know. They might actually help out the Russians anyways, and then we'll have to see what the West does in response. So I hope that answers the question to a good deal, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And just real briefly, past $14,000 on the fundraiser, we're seeing donations come in from all over the world. There's been donations in the form of Israeli shekels. I didn't even know that was a currency. The Norwegian krone. We've got coming in from Canada, just all over the world, which is incredible.
This is really amazing. Like, that's nuts. I can't believe that everyone from around the world is doing this. I got to tell y'all, I've never seen anything like this. This is the first time I've done a fundraiser. Thank God YouTube's doing all the numbers, because it would take me probably a year to do the numbers here if y'all are donating directly to me, and me not being a third party and YouTube kind of operating the donation side of things. But I have to thank y'all all so much, because y'all are doing a great service to the Ukrainians, and the Red Cross is already over there helping them out. So any amount of money that they can get towards their own organization is helping them deliver more to the Ukrainian people. And so I thank you all so much. I cannot believe this overwhelming amount of support for this fundraiser. I just can't believe it. I looked at a whole bunch of fundraisers before I came up with the $5,000 goal, and there was a whole bunch of them out there that I could have joined that other people started, and they had like $2,500 goals, and they had only gotten like $5 over 5 days. And so I was like, ooh, it's gonna be a tough shot to get $5,000 on a donation on a stream. But now we're up to almost $15,000, and we're only $10,000 away from reaching the $25,000 goal. So I can't believe this. If y'all can keep at this rate through the rest of the stream, I'm sure we're going to reach that goal by the end of the night and then some. So make sure to keep on donating. Make sure to do that. I'm throwing in $100 of my own money at the end of the stream once it's over. So make sure to keep on and help me help Ukraine. That's the whole goal of the stream and the whole goal of this channel. And so that being, well, not really the goal of like the channel throughout its entire life. We will be focusing on content in the future, but it will be focused on reporting news and current events and kind of how militaries operate and stuff. But you will be supporting the war effort and helping us help out Ukraine. So that being said, I thank you all so much. Once again, this is amazing. And we're going to move on to the questions.
Next question comes in from David Aldridge. Are foreign volunteers going to be protected by wartime law?
I don't really know how that actually works. I'm not, while I am in law school, well, not really in law school, while I'm getting ready to go to law school, I don't really know how international law or the rules of war work, so I don't really know if they're afforded the same protection as other kinds of combatants. I would have to take a better deep dive into that, and I'm sure that now that I've said that, we have some sleuths in our moderator section and also in our live chat that can probably get us an answer to that very soon. So if we do get that, Drew, and we're in the questions, make sure to bring that back up so that way they can get an answer to that question. It's a very good one. And so with that, we're going to move on to the last question in this little segment, and then we're going to move on to the news in the Southern Front.
So, interesting question. I did not get the individual who asked this because it was forwarded via a mod, but do you think that the EU/NATO nations will offer asylum to Russian deserters / quote-unquote traitors?
That's a tough one to answer because we haven't really heard them discuss that much. We've heard that discussed on online forums like, Reddit and elsewhere, but we haven't actually heard anyone discuss that seriously outside of Ukraine, because we've seen some Ukrainian politicians mention that as well. But we haven't seen anyone in the West say that, in the NATO countries. And so I don't know if that's something that they would do, but if they did that, it would kind of be like the Chu Hois in Vietnam. If y'all don't know about the Chu Hoi program was telling North Vietnamese soldiers that were part of like the NVA and the Viet Cong, and they were telling them, hey guys, if y'all like desert from the North Vietnamese, you can come to the South and we'll help you set up a whole new life, whole new like job, and we're gonna make sure that your lives are perfect, and we'll actually pretty much reward you for giving up and just deserting to our side. And it was met with some success, and so this would be much like that in the modern day. It would be like a modern day Chu Hoi, but it'd be for the Russians. So I don't know what they call it for Russia, but yeah, I mean, like, I could see that happening. It's just a question of, are the politicians in charge of these governments around the Western sphere thinking in that regard as well? And so we'll just have to wait in the coming days to see if anything like that happens. And so with that being said, everyone take a sip.
You mind? Before we move on to the next section, can we recognize some of these big donors?
Yes.
Okay, because we've got quite a few people throwing down some money at this thing. I'd like to say thank you to Richard Michalko. I can't say your last name, and I apologize. Donated $450 to the American Red Cross.
God, thank you, man. Thank you.
We have Anonymous, you know who you are, donated $100. We have H2 Burrow Matt donating $100. We have Jared Lennon donating $100. Thank you. Trevor Smith donating $100. John Leschak donating $100. We have Mike McCarney donating $100. We have Spence Pants donating $75. Adam Ellis donating $50. And the list goes on and on and on.
So let me ask you this. How far has that gotten us towards the goal now?
Sitting at 15,700 from what I see. So we are well past the 50%. We're creeping up on 75%.
Golly. Wow. We're 200% past the original $5,000 goal at this point. Keep this up, folks. Remember what I said. $5 from each of you will get us well beyond that goal of $25,000. So keep that up, and by the end of the stream, we'll have a nice tidy sum to deliver to the Red Cross, so that way they can maybe expand their efforts to some degree in Ukraine. So moving on from that, we're going to finally move on to the southern region. And before I do that, before Drew recognized all the donors, I said, that being said, and if anyone's playing the drinking game, make sure to take a sip. So that being said, take another sip. We're going to move on to the city of Izium, where we've had incredible good news, and we've seen an Su-34, which is the bomber variant of an Su-27, get shot down. And so I'm going to show y'all that right here. So you can see in the video, it's just a pure fireball coming down towards the ground. Good stuff. I don't know if the pilot's ejected, but nonetheless, considering it's a bomber, it's a very important plane to shoot down. And so regardless of the loss of life, that was a great target to knock out. Wonderful thing that the Ukrainians did, knocking that plane out, and another kill for the Ukrainians in terms of aircraft. So now we're going to move on. We haven't got any news of what's been happening around the Donetsk and Luhansk area, but we did get news today from the city of Mariupol. And I'm probably about to pull up my Discord and read y'all a letter from someone in Mariupol. One of our moderators translated that today for me to read, because I believe that it's very stirring, moving, and it will help y'all all understand what the people of Mariupol are going through, because it's unfortunate. So covering the news before we get to that, we can see that the Azov Battalion is fighting back valiantly against the Russians. We can see here in this video that they are not letting an inch of ground be taken without a good fight. And so here we are. I'll show you the video. It's very good stuff to always see that the defenders of Mariupol are still holding. While the suffering is continuing in the city, and that's a terrible thing, it's always a great thing to know that they're holding the city because it's tying up tens of thousands of Russian soldiers that could be elsewhere pushing other offensives further into Ukraine, but they're all held up waiting for the defenders of Mariupol to defiantly keep on pushing them out of the city or at least holding their ground. Moving on to the next bit of news we've got, we can see that some buildings were hit in Mariupol. I'll show you all that right here. We don't know if these were occupied. I feel like they most likely were, considering most of the citizens of Mariupol are stuck there. It's always terrible to see. It already looks like they hit this building as well. They just don't give, and they don't give civilians a break in the Russian army. They mean they don't really care if they're civilians or not. They're going to hit whatever they want to shoot. So moving on from that, we can see that there was a destroyed school in Mykolaiv. I'll show you all this as well. Of course, not a lot of good news comes out of Mariupol. It's nothing but suffering and devastation. But once again, much like Kharkiv, it was either suffering and devastation or they surrendered and no damage occurred to the city, and Ukraine could have been lost. So I'm going to show you all this video. And we always have to give credit, while they're not military per se, we always have to give credit to the firefighters and the police who still do their jobs bravely in Ukraine. The police pretty much have become a paramilitary force in some places like Mykolaiv, where we've actually seen the police engage Russian units. And we've seen the firefighters valiantly, regardless of the danger of being shot, going out into the danger and putting out the fires that could start to ravage entire cities. And so I do always have to commend the firefighters and the police. Although they don't get a lot of credit, they're as much deserving of credit as the soldiers who are currently fighting on the front, because they themselves put themselves in danger every day to make sure that they can keep the Ukrainians in general as safe as possible and help out the war effort in any way they can. So with that being said, everyone take a sip. We're going to move on to the next bit of news from Melitopol today. We can see that there are still protests going on in Melitopol. It appears that they're starting to get pretty heated, and then later on in Kherson, we're going to see that they're getting violent. So I'm going to show you this video. It's rather self-explanatory. It's also got a translation, which is very helpful. And then we're going to read the letter from Mariupol. So.
Просто очень жалко. Подождите, кто здесь может кто-то объяснить?
Я хочу сказать.
Вот вы как старший человек здесь, да, работаете?
Ну,
вот
хорошо. Это моя жена, я отец семерых сыновей. Они стоят в разных местах, но мне жалко вас как сыновей. Поймите, здесь очень много полегло ваших и наших. Очень много полегло. Зачем это делать? Вы просто или обманутые люди. Мы нормально живем, мы нормальная страна, мы на вас не нападаем. Вы ж... Поймите, у вас смерть в глазах. Понимаете, у вас в глазах смерть. Я не хочу сказать, я очень не хочу, чтобы вы были покойниками. Но Украина сильнее вас. Потому что Украина с Богом. Мы молимся, весь народ стал с Богом. Понимаете?
Вы понимаете, если мы уйдем, мы будем дезертировать.
А?
Если мы уйдем, мы будем дезертировать.
Ребята, оставьте
оружие. Попробуйте.
Мы вас не будем трогать.
Выберите жизнь. Выберите жизнь.
Hey guys, this is Ben.
So I'm going to cut off the video there. Also credit to the guy who did the translations. This is his channel, I believe. So go check him out and subscribe to him, because the translation was incredibly helpful. We got to actually see that the Russians weren't impartial to the idea of deserting. It's just that they were scared of being listed as deserters from the Russian army and getting punished for it. So it's showing that the Russians may not actually be into this war. Like many people have said, that the morale is low. And so with that, I'm going to move on into our Discord real quick, because I'm wanting to make sure I check out something from our mods, if I can find it. Believe it may be under link sharing. I'm not entirely sure. Hey Drew, do you know where that letter was put, the translated version of it?
Chasing it down for you.
Got you, man.
I'm gonna send it to you in a private message, okay?
Got you.
Just that way you're not showing the whole mod chat situation there.
Yeah, that's
all.
All right. So I'm going to read this letter to y'all, and this is actually from a citizen within the Mariupol that's currently besieged right now. Today,
private message.
Got you. So today my father from Mariupol called me. His name is Skalin Ruslan. Everyone knows that he has been defending the city since the first day of the war. If you heard his voice, you would understand the state of the city as of today, on the 12th of March, 2022. All he had to say was, there are a mountain of corpses in the city. We need help. Raise the public. Not a humanitarian convoy. We need an army. Ring on city narrows. For all the days of the war, I did not allow myself to beat in hysterics. But now, convoys, humanitarian convoys will not solve anything. The city is under airstrike from 6 to 6. Have you seen this crater near the hospital? So that's the whole city. The entire city looks like that, is what she's trying to say. Remember, Mariupol is a city that has defended Ukraine's borders every day since 2014. If it is not kept now, then the struggle for independence will become useless. I'm not afraid to say that the state of Mariupol is like a cauldron. The city does not give up, but they need help. I am ready to answer all the questions and comment on what I know for sure. I beg everyone who knows me, my father and brother, maximum reposts. So we can see from that letter right there that the woman inside of Mariupol, it's a woman who sent that letter. She is calling, she's pleading for support from the outside. If that's not enough, I mean, like, really think about that. There's a woman right now in Mariupol watching all the suffering and death. And the death has gotten so bad that the bodies are having to be thrown into massive trenches that they dig out in the middle of the city, and they're thrown into mass graves by the hundreds at this point. And so you got to think about that, and think about if that was your family that was getting thrown in that trench. And if that was your brother or your sister or your mother or your dad, or you're watching your relatives die from starvation and thirst because there's hardly any food or water left in the city. And you tell me, what would you like the world to do? Would you like any help? Of course you would. Everyone would want help in a situation like that for their family. And so think about the war from that perspective from now on for all of the international viewers. Shouldn't we do something to help these people out? Because in my opinion, we should. They haven't done anything wrong. These civilians were just living their lives about 2.5 weeks ago, and now they're in the middle of a siege, and they're starving, and they're dehydrated nearly to death, because the Russians mean that they will break that city regardless of how many innocent people they have to kill. And so I hope that rallies y'all up enough that y'all are calling your senators, your representatives, your governors right now of the cities that you're in, and the representatives of your government from all around the world for all the international viewers we have here. And I hope you're calling them up and you are telling them that we should get more involved in this war than what we're just doing now. Because while what we're doing now is very powerful, at least economically, it's not stopping this war at the moment. And so we need to do more. And so I hope y'all start calling up your representatives and speaking to them about this matter and how we should start getting much more involved in this. Because I will also be calling up my representatives within the next day or two and talking to them and seeing that maybe, since this channel is so highly viewed and it represents such a large group of people, that they will take my pleas as seriously as everyone else's, or maybe even more. So now that I've read that letter to y'all, we're going to move on to the city of Enerhodar, where we can see some very disturbing events unfolding. It appears that the Russians are grabbing people off of the streets and throwing them into vans. I'll show you all that right now. I'm just going to not interrupt this and just let y'all see it for yourselves.
Да, пиздят его. багажник вертолета был.
Да открывали уже багажник.
Сука, пиздят его. Ля что делают, уроды? Пидорасы.
Женщина сама сейчас.
Да, наверное. Он ее села в машину, женщина.
Ты
посмотри, что делают. Твари. Сука, на не русском разговаривает. Чеченцы ебаные. Бля, что делает? Он его нахуй убивает.
Ровная кровь, глупый.
Ты представляешь? Говорит, жить надоело.
Да кто
А вам, сукам, жить не надоело?
Давайте по домам.
Ага, по домам.
Пиздец охуенный.
This is kind of like how they kidnapped the mayor of Kherson. Well, no, I'm sorry. I believe it was actually Melitopol. I believe that they're actually kidnapping a string of mayors right now from Kherson to Melitopol, and they're just snatching up people off the street. I don't even like. What is the point? What is their objective behind this? Are these people that they deem to be dangerous to their occupation efforts? Maybe people that they know are trying to start conducting partisan efforts against their logistics or their units. I don't really know. We don't have a lot of information about why this is happening. We just know that the Russians are starting to arrest people and throw them inside of vans. Very disturbing stuff. Moving on to the city of Kherson today. Now, it finally happened. And we've been talking about partisans on this channel for a bit, and I said, these little protests that we're seeing in these cities are eventually going to turn into raw anger against the Russians, and they're actually going to start helping out the war effort in their own way. And so today, we can see that that happened in Kherson. I'm going to show you all the video. It's good stuff. This was purely a partisan attack on a Russian logistical unit passing through the city, and they wiped the thing out.
Летали котики. Хотели что-то, наверное. Может, не хотели. Ну, короче, пизда вам, ребята, что я хочу сказать вам. Скоро вы, сука, все сдохнете здесь.
It brings a lot of joy to me to know that even the civilians who just days ago were still kind of mostly peacefully protesting against the Russian invasion will resort to doing somewhat clandestine attacks on the Russians. It's always good to know that there are people out there who will take the matters into their own hands and try and win the war any way they can, because you know they'll start to rack up a toll on Russian vehicles, equipment, and men with partisan attacks happening all throughout the occupied territories of Ukraine. So now we're going to move into the city. We've seen a decent amount of protests in Kherson still, even with the partisan efforts happening on the outskirts of the city, and I'm going to show you all this here.
Русский солдат!
Фашисты, смотрите, что творится, русские стреляют.
They keep on marching bravely. No matter what happens, the Russians could be firing right over their heads, and these protesters mean they will not give up, and they'll just keep on walking at them. And you gotta say, that's a lot of bravery, and once again, that's starting to lead into that suggestion I'm saying. Maybe we ought to start getting more involved, because these people mean they're not going to be taken over. And so make sure to call up your representatives and your government officials and start trying to persuade them that we need to do more, because maybe it will be the tipping point. Maybe this audience in this stream will call up enough times that we'll actually start to see a change in government policy towards this war, at least in our countries. So moving on, we're going to move on to another perspective of this protest that occurred today. This is in another part of the city, and so here you are. Makes you think. So we're going to move on from Kherson now, and we're going to move on up into the last bit of news we have inside of Ukraine today. And this is what I need to have cleared up from the mainstream news, because they made this sound an entirely different way that would induce panic, and it would induce a larger amount of viewership on their channel. They said that the Russians were now launching an attack just 15 miles from the Polish border, and how they worded it on TV today when I saw it was like there were Russian troops up here in this area of Belarus, and they started pushing down into Ukraine. That wasn't the case. They completely misrepresented that story in terms of title and how they were wording it on the show. And I saw this on multiple channels. This was on CNN, Fox, and then the New York Times wrote it up that way as well in their articles. What happened was that there was a cruise missile attack at a military academy in Yavariv. But that doesn't mean that the Russians are actually launching some kind of offensive over here on the western side of the country. You know, they're completely miswording it to try and get viewers, and I don't like that at all, and I detest that kind of stuff, because if you have Ukrainian viewers, that's going to lead them to panic. They're about to think their whole entire country will be cut off from NATO, because the Russians will actually control this area of the country, and that's just not the case right now. And from our information, we know that logistics are already stretched just trying to conduct the offensives on the eastern side of the country, and so the fact that Russians would start an offensive on the western side as well is far-fetched from our information, and also untrue based off of what we actually know from the reports that we've been getting. So now moving into the last bit of news today. In Yavariv, we've had some more unfortunate news. A military academy was hit inside the city of Yavariv, and it appears that there were about 35 people killed. And so I'm going to show you all the aftermath of the military academy being attacked. It's also the Ukraine's Center for Peacekeeping and Security, but its actual name, from what I can tell, is something like the Military Academy of Yavariv or something like that. But nonetheless, you can see the damage here, and we also have, I believe, a video of the damage as well. And so I'll let y'all watch that and just let it run.
Пішли. Пішли.
Блядь, як нам повезло, що, блядь, не зласим, як давно в'їбав сюди нам підстана. Та ще вам внизу може є, нахуй нам 20-100%. Нам
Вам русський мір, хлопчики. А оце, блядь, що ви понімали? Оце, блядь, воронка в'їбала. Пизда, нахуй. Урала можна сховати, блядь. Там розхуячили все, блядь.
Rather unfortunate stuff. They say 9 dead here, but from what I could tell later on, it appears that a decent amount of the wounded died from their wounds. So, very unfortunate news. I hate that that's happened in Yavariv. It seems like the war, although they're not invading to the west, it does seem like the war is starting to reach further west from what we're getting as far as reports of bombings and missile attacks. So, hopefully, this doesn't become something that's widespread in this area. So, Now we're going to move on to the international news. We only got a bit from Moscow today. If you were all around from last night's stream, you may remember that I hyped up the little advanced Russian equipment, which was the mall cleaning machine. I won't be doing that tonight. We don't have anything that we can joke around with in terms of, you know, that supposed Russian superpower might that they have. But we have interesting information nonetheless in these two posts. It appears that the protests are regaining fervor. For a while, they kind of went quiet, and it was some kind of peaceful, quiet resistance, but it appears now that they're back to chanting slogans. So I'm going to show you all this. As far as we know, there's been around 14 to 15,000 Russians arrested for protesting against the war. So while I do not really like the Russians to a decent degree, we can at least know that there's a lot of Russians inside of Russia who do not agree with what the Russian government is doing as well. So it kind of makes me have mixed feelings for the Russians inside of Russia, because a decent amount of them we can see clearly support this war and they don't even believe that the Russians are attacking civilians or anything like that. But then there's also a decent amount of them that appear to be on the internet and actually have seen the truth, and they're out there trying to stop the Russians from what they're doing. Unfortunately, they're getting arrested, but it's always good to know that they're out there in such force and numbers that the amount of people who have been arrested for protesting in Russia is about equivalent in size to the amount of foreign volunteers that were in the First Foreign Legion that we heard about a week ago or so. So now moving on to the last bit of news. This one was just odd and really stupid, but we saw a woman get arrested for literally holding a piece of paper that had nothing on it. So take a look at this and tell me how much of a comedy this nearly is that they arrested a woman for literally holding a blank piece of paper. So you see right there, it's clearly blank. Kind of stupid. I think a lot of y'all would have to agree with me on that. So that being said, everyone take a sip. I just said it again. We're going to move on to the questions, and before we move on to the questions, I'm going to ask Drew how far we've made it to the $25,000 goal.
Currently sitting at $17,973, which is a little over 71% of the way there. And with the current amount of viewers, if everybody donated 76 cents, we'd be there.
How many viewers is that?
Sitting at 9,200.
Golly, wow. This has been a very highly viewed stream. And y'all just heard Drew. Y'all just heard the word. Just round that up an extra 25 cents. $1 from each of you. I know we all got $1. I mean, like, don't we all? If y'all could all donate $1, we'll be able to reach the goal tonight. And we won't have to continue this on for any other nights. We can get this out right now. We can get these funds to the Red Cross immediately. So make sure to donate, because it doesn't take much from all of us. It only takes a little bit, but a little bit from all of us is a lot in the end. So that being said, we're going to move on to the questions. And so what do we got, Drew?
Before we jump into the questions, do you mind if we do some acknowledgements?
Yes, let's do some acknowledgements.
Okay, and there's going to be a good number of anonymouses, but still want to recognize this. We got a $100 donation from Anonymous. You know who you are. Thank you. Another Anonymous with $100. You know who you are. Another Anonymous with $80. You know who you are because you're the only person to donate $80 so far tonight. We got Charles Grigori donating $50. We've got another Anonymous donating $50. We have George, New York's premier contractor, in the chat once again donating $20 to the cause here. We've got Anonymous with another $50. Another Anonymous with another $50. We've got Frank Wang with $50 Canadian. We've got Bruno Alves with $50 Canadian. We've got the Majestic Turtle with $50. He asked me how much I chipped in, and he said, okay, I'm going to match you. We've got Ed A donating $50. I should have donated more, I guess, right? If I'm getting matched. Yeah. We got Robert Rice donating $50. We got Oleg Pitchak donating $50. We've got another Anonymous just now in the chat donated $100. We've got another Anonymous donating $160 NOK. I'm not sure what that translates to in USD. We're sitting at 18,500 now almost. So we are so close to hitting that target as far as only a couple of, what was that, 7,000, not even 7,000 away.
Guys, we've
You guys
reached
rock.
yeah, y'all rock for sure. We've reached the original goal by 400% nearly at this point. It's really around 350%, but I'm going to round that up because I'm optimistic and I'm sure it's going to go up to 20,000 soon. If we can knock this out, guys, we will have sent $25,000 to the American Red Cross. And I know that I'm like hitting y'all up on that a lot, but if all of y'all just sent out $1, or if just a few of you, or a couple of thousand of y'all just sent out $5, we would reach this goal right now. And just think about this. Remember this, y'all, because this cannot be restated enough. Any amount of support you send, you can know that you helped out Ukraine in some way. Because there's very few ways that us people in the West can help out Ukraine. Very, very few. But this is one of those ways that we can. And so if you're really with the cause of helping out Ukraine, make sure to donate to this Red Cross fundraiser, because it's going to help them out, helping out the Ukrainians. And if you also want to help out in a larger extent, you can also call up your government officials and tell them that we may want to get a little bit more strong-handed in our stance in the West. And you can also call up your embassies in your countries and see if you can volunteer if you have any prior military experience. So now that we've gotten through that, and I thank you all once again, because I'm blown away at this point with how much support that we've gotten for the Red Cross tonight, we're going to now move on to the questions. And so what do we got, Drew?
So we have had some viewers, many viewers actually, asking for some clarification. Are you asking your viewers to call their representatives and call for war against Russia and officially start World War III?
I'm not asking for that, but I'm asking for the West to start taking a more stronger approach. It may sound like it was worded like that, but I'm asking for the West to start taking a stronger approach that we've seen Russia kind of do. Because if you remember in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I'm going to kind of use some historical reference here to get this picture across. If you remember in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians started to set up nuclear missile silos inside of Cuba, and that became a huge concern to the United States because the missiles were only 90 miles away from, the continental United States. And so this caused a lot of concern. And back in the day, when we had concerns about what the Russians/Soviets were doing, we didn't sanction them. We sat there and threatened outright war. We said, if you do not stop what you're doing, we will go to war. Even if it means that our country will be destroyed, we will annihilate you in the process of destroying ourselves. And we saw that in the end, that kind of strong-handed diplomacy actually ended up working, because we came to a compromise where the United States would remove the nuclear weapons out of Turkey, and in exchange, the Russians would remove the weapons out of Cuba. So, if it worked then, I'm assuming that it worked now. And so, I'm not saying that I'm wanting our representatives to go to Congress and then sign a unanimous declaration of war. I'm not really wanting that right off the bat, but I'm saying that if we want the right thing done, we're going to have to be a lot more heavy-handed in what we're demanding than what we're doing now with just the sanctions and kind of detesting what they're doing. We're going to have to say something like, you either stop this war or we're going to get involved. And so you have an ultimatum that's delivered to them, and you give them an amount of time to try and get through some talks or either start it. But nonetheless, I'm going to kind of go through the speech that I've said to a lot of viewers before. Doing the right thing isn't always going to be the easiest thing and the safest thing. As John F. Kennedy said before, we do things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And in this situation, look at all the suffering that's happening in Ukraine. It's very clear what's happening over there and the kind of afflictions that the Russians are putting on Ukrainian citizens. And you've got to imagine if that was your country. And you also have to imagine the kind of guy who's in charge of the Russian government and what he's already made clear at the beginning of the war, what he would like to do to the Baltic states and to Poland, and that will drag us in the future. And he's doing a lot of the things that the guy in Germany did during World War II. He said he wants to unite all of the Russian-speaking people and all the former Russian lands under Russia once more. That includes Ukraine, parts of Poland, and the Baltic states. And I believe that may even extend into Finland, because at one point they owned that as well. And so you have to think, much like appeasement in World War II, this could lead to us getting involved in the future. And so while we're stepping back now and we're letting them have it easy, they're only going to get more bold as time goes on, because we're showing them right now that all we'll do is kind of sanctioned. I mean, while the sanctions are incredibly strong, and I can't negate what they're doing. They're doing a lot. We do have to eventually step up and learn from the mistakes of the past and say, when we're dealing with a tyrant and some kind of nut, we know we need to stand up and actually put our foot down and tell them this will not go on any further. Even if we have to do the hard thing, it is the right thing. And so that's kind of my stance on it. And so now if you're thinking about calling up your representatives, you kind of know my standpoint on saying that. While it wasn't really coming out that way, that's really what I mean. And so with that, we're going to move on to the questions.
And I'd like to point out that the fundraiser is over $20,000, 500. So making incredible progress. We've got donations coming in from all over the world, from Thailand to Mexico to New Zealand, Israel, Canada. We've got coming in from the UK, Norway. It's incredible. But next question. Wow. Just letting that. And
I have to say this to you, Drew, before we move on, and all the mods who are watching the stream right now. This is actually the kind of difference that we were looking to make with this channel, because we've been reporting the news, and all of us have taken a vested interest in making sure that we are helping out Ukraine as much as possible. But I think this point right here is the most help that we've done over the course of this channel's history. I just can't really believe it. Can you?
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
And so, that being said, everyone take a sip. I just did it again. We're going to move on to the questions now, but we're so blown away we're probably going to answer very little questions. But I'm going to keep this stream running until we reach 25,000. I know we're going to do that tonight, and I'm not going to cut this thing off early. So we're going to sit here until we reach 25,000 and answer questions until then. And so, what do we got, Drew?
And before we jump into there, I want to acknowledge some of these high rollers. We got John Hall donating $150. Thank you. We've got Anonymous donating $100 once again. We've got Peter T donating $100. We've got Victor's Labs Notebook donating $50. We've got Julian donating $50. We've got Anonymous donating $50. We just got another Anonymous donating $100. And I'm going to... Yeah, I can't just read these the entire time, or I'm going to go ahead and get into the next question here. Coming in from Lego My Ego. If you don't want NATO at your borders, then why would you want to invade sovereign nations to repatriate the old USSR borders, which will essentially have NATO at your borders once again?
So that's a great question, and it's kind of... It's a good point, but there's a bit of extra information to that, and it's a good point. But once you look into it, you can kind of see why they're doing this. Ukraine is going to go one way or the other after this war. It's either going to start going more western, or it's going to go eastern, depending on who wins. If it goes eastern, the Russians will have a front line with NATO that stretches across this much shorter Ukrainian border here, and also this Romanian border. But overall, it's much shorter. And then they'll have this border of Belarus and then the Estonian states. If Ukraine joins NATO, then they'll share this entire border that crosses the entirety of southern Belarus, as well as its western and northern borders will be bordering NATO countries. And then the rest of this border that actually borders Russia is much longer than the border over here. And so when you look at it, the Russians are trying to shorten their front line with NATO by trying to take over Ukraine and turn it into probably a puppet nation that would be some kind of buffer zone. And so that's what they're trying to do. It's a great question, and it's highly echoed, but there is a strategic kind of decision that they've made in invading Ukraine in the future of their national defense in a way. Although really, when you look at them, they're a regional power, and so they're not really entitled to the defense and buffer nations that superpowers have. So, moving on to the next question, what do we got, Drew?
Okay, so this is a pretty frequently asked question, but James Sinclair asks, why is the United Nations not creating a buffer zone or a no-fly zone, not NATO, question mark?
The United Nations nor NATO is creating a no-fly zone at the moment because a no-fly zone involves directly shooting down Russian aircraft, and so regardless what entity is doing it, it's a declaration of war in a way. So you've got to be very careful when doing that against countries like Russia that have nuclear arsenals, because unlike Libya, because we declared a no-fly zone over Libya and just shot everything down there, they didn't have nukes, but Russia does. And so, regardless what entity's actually declaring the no-fly zone and enforcing it, they will retaliate. And so that's kind of the concern right now with the no-fly zone, because that's pretty much escalating this into World War III immediately. So that was a great question, by the way, because that's not really explained a lot by a lot of people, but there are a decent amount of YouTube videos on it from other channels, and I highly recommend you watching them because they give a very detailed, down the rabbit hole kind of description about what a no-fly zone entails. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Matt Secret. The Enforcer, why isn't Russia using more aircraft?
The Russians aren't using more aircraft, and this is always contested because a lot of people say, oh, the Ukrainians have lost air superiority. They haven't. And that's why the Russians aren't using a lot of aircraft, is because they're afraid of losing them. Because a lot of the Russian aircraft that they have right now, like Su-27s, MiG-29s, and so I'm not really sure if the Russians use MiG-29s. I think that's a Ukrainian thing, but the aircraft they have now aren't just being produced constantly. You know, it's not like a Ford F-150 where you can just go buy another one from the company. These things were built in a certain amount of numbers, and they were built at a certain time, and so replacing them is impossible because they're just not producing them anymore. It's kind of like how B-52s in Vietnam were irreplaceable, because if a B-52 was shot down, there was no longer a production line producing B-52s back in the United States. So B-52 lost was lost permanently, and there was never going to be a replacement for the loss of that aircraft. And so it's like that for Russia right now for most of their jets. If they lose them, they're probably never getting them back. And so you have to carefully weigh out irreplaceable assets like that, because if they're lost forever, and you have to really think about the future situation that you may be facing around the world, or the future situation in this war alone, and weigh out, would you want to lose those aircraft now or later? And so that was a pretty good question. That was actually a very solid one. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
So next question comes in from Josh Lineker. Do you think Starstreak will make a big difference?
Do you know what Starstreak is, Drew?
So Starstreak is a piece of British equipment. It is a short-range man-portable air defense system.
Oh my God! I know what it is now. I'm sorry, I completely lost it for a minute. The Starstreak used to be my favorite, kind of like anti-air system. It's just that it caught me off guard there. But of course, that'll make a difference. Any kind of anti-air equipment makes a difference in the air war. It's just the problem with the Starstreak, unlike other anti-air equipment, is that it's not fire and forget, and the operator actually has to guide the Starstreak onto the target the entire time. And so it's a little bit more difficult to use and requires a little bit more training, but it is a very interesting piece of equipment because it actually has three little, like, APFSDS shell kind of looking things that spin around in a circle as they fly, and, you know, they have like a kind of shorter range, but they are an interesting piece of equipment nonetheless, and I'm sure they'll actually be put to great use inside of Ukraine if they are there, or if they're being delivered there right now. So that was a pretty good question. I'm sorry if I was a little ignorant about the Starstreak at the start. I caught on a little late, but I thank you for the question. That was a very good one. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
Next question comes in from Jermaine Down. Do you have any thoughts on why the international community hasn't invoked Chapter 27, Paragraph 3 of the United Nations Charter? Belligerent parties must abstain when voting at the UN Security Council.
I don't really know why they wouldn't. And I once again have to plea ignorance in the matter of UN law. I don't really know much about how the UN Charter works or its clauses inside of it. And so I really can't comment as to why they haven't imposed that yet, mostly due to ignorance on my part about how the UN Charter actually works and how it's implemented. So I'm sorry I can't really answer that question. And before we move on to the next one, how far have we made it to the $25,000 goal?
So as of right now, sitting at $21,811 out of this goal. So we are getting quite close. I'm going to do some quick math on the calculator so I can get a exact amount to go.
Quick, everyone, donate while he's doing the math so that way we can throw him off.
There you go. So sitting at $3,189 to go. We've got 7,900 people in the chat. So I'll do a little bit of other quick math and divide that by the viewers we got here. And obviously, so many people have already donated, and your donations are much appreciated. And we'll be doing some acknowledgements here again. But that comes out to 40 cents per remaining viewer. And boom, target hit, money shipped. Job well done.
Everyone, donate right now. Like, we can get this thing done tonight, and that money can go out tonight instead of tomorrow night. And wars operate very quickly in the modern world, so the quicker we get that out, the more it can be put to use. So donate as much as you can, because I'm also donating $100. So if you want to match me, I'm putting in $100. And if we could just get a decent amount of people to put in $100, we're done. And we'll have that thing out tonight. And remember all the stories I've told you about all the Ukrainian citizens that are pleading for help and all the suffering they're going through, and think about the American Red Cross being able to help them out. And this amount of money will help them a good deal. And so that being said, I hope we get a whole influx of donations there to this cause, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question. Has anyone seen anything using IEDs in the occupied cities?
We haven't yet. It seems like the Ukrainians are more focusing on using Molotovs from what we can tell. We haven't seen any IEDs yet. But if we do, I'm going to make sure to report on that immediately, because we've had a lot of questions if those have been used yet. And as far as we know, we haven't gotten any reports of that. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Hogjet10. Do you think the Russians are keeping the Black Sea fleet off the coast of Odessa to tie up Ukrainian armed forces and keep them from leaving Odessa to assist other areas of Ukraine?
I think that may be the case. We know as far as we do right now that force is actually a landing force, perhaps, and they're waiting for the Russian breakthrough at Mykolaiv to then reach Odessa, and then they're going to land the naval forces somewhere in between Mykolaiv and Odessa, but we don't know particularly where. That's what we know right now. That may be different, but I think that the Ukrainians would keep soldiers in Odessa regardless, because Odessa is an important port city, and so they wouldn't want to lose that. So I don't really think they're tying up any troops there by keeping that fleet off the coast. I just think that they're putting some strain and stress on the Ukrainians, thinking that a naval invasion may be launched without a breakthrough at Mykolaiv. So I hope that answers the question, and we're going to move on to the next one.
So, next question coming in from Tealish Pixel. Do you think China will give Russia anything?
I don't really think so. It's because, I kind of said this a little bit earlier, and I'm going to recap it a little bit shorter, so that way some of the viewers who are around don't have to hear this twice. But the Chinese have to really weigh in the economic factors heavily when they do anything, because unlike the Russians who just exported oil, they export a whole load of stuff, and it equivalates to around $400 billion in a trade surplus per year. And so they're making a whole load of money off of international trade. And their two major trade partners in terms of income are the European Union and the United States. And we can already see the tough stance that the EU and the United States have taken against Russia. And imagine if they did that to China, if they were to support Russia. And so they have to weigh that out in their considerations to see if they would be willing to take that kind of hit to their fragile economy that's still growing as of the moment, and relies heavily on foreign exports. And so I hope that answers the question to a good degree, and is kind of a short answer. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
So next question comes in from Christina Valenzuela, and I'd like to comment on this as well. Does this money go to the Ukrainian people or the U.S. Red Cross? And then my note that I'd like to add is all of these donations that are being processed through YouTube covers 100% of the fees. So all of that gets passed on to the charitable organization.
And also, this isn't being passed on directly to Ukraine. I tried to figure out if there would be a way for me to donate to a charitable cause inside of Ukraine, but based off of all the fundraising options I had, it didn't actually allow that. Like, the best thing I could have done then was some sort of student fund for kids in Ukraine who were wanting to go to school, but I don't really think that helps out the war effort as much as the American Red Cross. And so the money that's being raised right here is going to the American Red Cross, which will then, of course, be operating in Ukraine heavily, because they already are right now, and so that money helps them to continue operations inside of Ukraine. And so I hope that answers your question, and I hope that also helps people understand a little bit more about where the money's going, and hopefully that helps y'all get encouraged a little bit more to donate. And so, that being said, where are we at right now with that fundraiser?
Fundraiser's at $22,995. So we are getting so close, and you are getting that much closer to being able to get a few hours of sleep.
That's right. That's right.
Sleep is a luxury.
Sleep is a luxury.
$2,000 to go. Less than $2,000 to go. $23,150. We are quite nearly there.
Let me tell you something, folks. I'm going to stay up until we reach that goal. And so if y'all want me to get some sleep, donate now, because I'm going to stay up until we get this goal reached. I promise you that. So if you care for my well-being, if that's something that'll motivate you to donate, donate. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge some of these high rollers here, some of these big donators. Unfortunately, we can't realistically read off every single donation, as there's, I believe, been many, many hundreds of individual unique donations, if not over 1,000 individual unique donations. Going to go ahead and say thank you to Ryan Melendez for donating $200 to the Red Cross. Incredible donation. Larva donated $150. Thank you, Larva. We've got Jersey Bob donated $100. We've got Anonymous donated $100. You know who you are, Anonymous. Thank you. We've got Xenocide21 donating $21. I wonder if that's like a Ender's Game reference there. Dan Brown, I believe. Or we got Gazul donating 75 Canadian. We've got Anonymous chipping in 50. We've got Leo Stevo donating $30. We've got John Michael donating $20. The list just keeps on going. We got Austere Panic donating $50 just now. We've got Anonymous donated $500 just now. So
oh my gosh. Golly.
You know who you are, Anonymous. So that's incredible. Sitting at $23,885. We've got people donating in for a massive spectrum here. Robert CD donated $3. Robert, thank you for contributing. You know, every single little dollar is adding to this. We've got Bench Press chipping in $25. We've got Ethan Tube donating $5. We've got somebody donating in a currency that I don't know what it is. A TBH. Is that Thailand or something? 400 TBH.
Let me pull that up. TBH currency. That is a Thai bot, so that is Thailand dollars. Thai dollars, I guess.
Lots and lots and lots of anonymouses. Just incredible, you guys. We are almost there.
How close are we now?
23,933. We add in your $100, and we're past the 24,000 mark. That means that we're less than $1,000 to go, which is insane. And you've got 7,000 people in the chat at the moment, or in the views at the moment. So if every single person chipped in the fraction that remains here, you're looking at 14 pennies per person to finish this thing out and call it a day and get this money shipped off.
Come on, y'all, we can do it. We can do this. We're so damn close. We can do this for sure.
Another Anonymous donating 100 there. You know who you are, and thank you. We've got Anonymous donating 20 Canadian. We've got Anonymous donating 10. We've got a SEK. I don't know that currency, so I'm going to find out what that one is. It's incredible that these are coming in Swedish krona. So coming in from all over the world. You guys are incredible. I think we're going to hit this before you know it, and you can stop hearing us asking y'all to chip in.
And we're so thankful once again to everyone who is donating. I can't believe that we've had this kind of support tonight for this fundraiser. We started off with a $5,000 goal, and we've passed that by nearly 500% at this point. And so I can't believe this. I can't thank y'all enough for this.
$400 to go.
How much?
400.
Gee, then wait, who just threw in that much money? Do we have his name?
They're just flooding in right now. They're just flooding in of all different sizes. We got Anonymous with $5 here. We've got Steven donating $20. We've got Kyle Lindstrom donating $1. Just chipping in a little bit. Everybody, we got this power of the crowd. We've got Nessa No Davison donating £5. We've got O'Hams donating £20. We are about $300 from the goal at the moment, minus your $100. We're about $200 away from hitting this target. And we've got Geoff L donated $501. That's where the big chunk was right there. Geoff.
Thank you, Geoff. I think your name may be like Jeff or Geoff, whatever it is.
Geoff. So apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. $24,970. Add in your donation, there, Enforcer, and the goal has been
Passed
met.
the goal.
That's $25,000 there that you guys just raised.
Well, I
Situation in
guess
Ukraine.
I guess that means that we just won. At least in our small part. Well, everyone, we've probably already passed the mark at this point. We're probably well above 25,000 by a few dollars now. But I'd like to tell everyone, I thank y'all all so much. We didn't even get to a lot of questions tonight because we're just so blown away with the support that we're getting for this cause. And so I can't thank y'all enough. It really means a lot to me, and I'm so proud to know that my videos have garnered this much support for the Ukrainian cause and the war. And I have to thank my mods once again, because they're great. They're wonderful people. They've been helping me do this. And I thank all of y'all enough. Everyone from the mods to the viewers to all the donors in the stream right now. I can't thank y'all enough. We've done more than anyone could have imagined, at least from my channel, to help out the war effort. And so thank you all. And I'm going to cut the stream short tonight right here. And I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless again. And this hasn't happened until the first night when this channel blew up and I was getting a lot of views. I was speechless then, and I'm speechless now. I thank you all so much. If y'all like this stream and the news we gave, and you also like the efforts that we're going through to help out the Ukrainians, make sure to subscribe. The stream comes on at 10 p.m. Eastern time every night. The daylight savings time now for some of y'all around the world has pushed us, I believe, backwards an hour, and so it's an hour earlier than normal for most of you. But once again, I thank you all so much, and I'm going to see y'all all tomorrow. Thank you once again, and Slava Ukraina.